Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inter Show, following on from a 2-1 win away to Chievo. Joining me again is James.
Hi, Andrew. Hello to all our listeners. Looking forward to getting into it and discussing a big week coming up for Inter.
Well, we managed to get the 3 points, even though it was a struggle. To be honest, we both thought it would be against a team fighting for their lives. Icardi wasn't great, but the more and more I see of him, the more he reminds me of a fellow Welshman, Ian Rush. Rush could be completely out of a game for 89 minutes and then kill a side in 60 seconds. Icardi did what he had to do and what we expect of him. Obviously, Perisic got the other goal. I liked how Spalletti defended the team, though, by challenging the sports journalists to tell him why it was a bad thing that we had two players scoring the overwhelming majority of our goals.
I take your point about Icardi. The American commentator on beIN Sports called him a footballing ninja. You don't see him until he scores, which I think sums him up really well. I have to disagree with Spalletti. Having all your goals coming from only two players and nearly half from just one is very limiting. It means the opposition teams can better game plan against you as they only have to focus on two players. Also, relying heavily on a couple of players can come back to bite you, especially if they pick up an injury or suspension. I mean, recently teams have tended to have an attacking trio. Last season, Barca had Messi, Suarez, Neymar. In the past, Madrid have had Benzema, Bale and Ronaldo to rely on. Although I think that triumvirate is coming to an end, and currently Liverpool have Firmino, Salah and Mane. The more players get capable of getting 10 to 15 goals a season, I think the better chance it gives you at winning stuff.
I'd agree with you, but and I see where you're coming from, but I think Ronaldo scores a phenomenal number of Real Madrid's goals. I mean, so does Lionel Messi for Barcelona. I think all good sides have one or two dominant scorers, though. Yes, I admit a few more goals from other players would help. I really liked Caramo again, and Rafinha is starting to look classy. His pass for Perisic goal was sublime. Brozovic dominated midfield again.
I have to disagree with you on Caramo. I thought he was very wasteful at times. It might be harsh seeing as he's so young, but I thought he lost possession too easily and tried to be clever in areas where, winning a throw-in or a corner would have been enough to sustain the pressure. I thought Miranda was quite poor, especially for the Chievo goal. He took up a very poor position, which allowed Stupinski in to score. He took it well. The player that stood out for me was Rafinha. He tried to go forward and create every time he got the ball. He's a real joy to watch when he's on the ball. His touch and awareness is first class. He always knows what he wants to do, and as he's receiving the ball, he puts his body in the perfect position to receive the ball and only takes the necessary amount of touches. He's very efficient with it. Hopefully with pre-season, he can become a world beater next season. He's got all the attributes, I think, to become a top player.
What did you think of the big talking point at the match, James, the VAR decision on Icardi's goal?
Yeah, I thought VAR got it spot on, to be honest. I mean, D'Ambrosio was onside. It was the correct decision. I know Chievo were protesting afterwards, maybe about the fact that the linesman had flagged while Icardi was putting it in the net. But on the replay, one of the angles showed that the goalkeeper and defenders were trying to get to the ball, and I think the linesman was on the other side, so I don't think they actually seen the flag go up until afterwards. So I don't think they can have too many complaints. The only thing I don't like about the VAR is that we don't get to see the process to go through to arrive at decision. I know in other sports, they show the replays they're looking at and you can hear the officials talking through what they're thinking and the process, and I think maybe that would help the fans better understand the decisions that they come to.
Yeah, in terms of the VAR, I think it was, like Gazzetta dello Sport said, that although the linesman's flag had gone up, and the referee had put his arm up, he hadn't actually blown his whistle. Now, had he blown his whistle, VAR couldn't intervene because it would have to run with the offside decision. But because he hadn't blown his whistle, technically play hadn't stopped, and certainly the Gazzetta journalists were of the thought that the goal was valid. I personally wouldn't like to see the VAR played out on screens in football stadia because I think it could lead to an increased possibility of trouble. It's a sad indictment on soccer, but other sports where decisions are played out in front of supporters, there's either very little or no trouble ever. Rugby would be a prime example there. I think showing what the referee is seeing to fans at home, though, would add something. And I don't see any reason not to do that, because obviously the people at home are not going to cause a problem within the stadium.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. I think showing it at home should definitely be a thing to look into. Not that I could understand it anyway if it was in Italian. But now we're going to have a look what the Italian papers had to say on the game. And La Gazzetta dello Sport led with Inter hound the Romans. They gave the team a performance mark of 6.5. Their top Nerazzurro player mark went to Perisic with 7, and they selected Borja Valero as the worst Inter player with 5. Remember that in Italy, 6 is the acceptable performance level.
Il Corriere dello Sport said Lazio fly, but Inter is also there. They gave their top mark for our player Handanovic with 7.5, which I can see where they're coming from, because he did make a couple of good saves and he could easily have ended up in a draw or worse had he not put in such a strong performance. The lowest mark went to Borja Valero again with 5.
Tutto Sport reported Spalletti's comments that whoever says Inter is failing its objective is damaging the team. Their top mark for an Interista went to Rafinha with 7.5. Their lowest to Cancelo at 5.5.
Milan's version of Metro said the Nerazzurri stay on path.
L'Arena, Verona's local newspaper, said Icardi, then Perisic, applause and anger for Chievo.
I have to say, I find myself this week in the strange situation of agreeing with Tutto Sport, which gave 6 to Borja Valero. I thought he was very weak in the first half when Spalletti had obviously asked him to play a coast-to-coast role similar to Nainggolan or Gerrard. I mean, I honestly can't blame him for performing poorly in that position, though. He's simply not fast enough. He's not dynamic enough, and a coach of Spalletti's experience should know that. In the second half, Spalletti obviously gave him more of a license to spray the ball around, and Valero, let's be honest, is a bit of a poor man's Andrea Pirlo, was able to significantly raise his performance. Going in against Juve with them looking so tired against Napoli, I really think Borja could make a difference if he's allowed to pass the ball around for faster players like Brozovic, Perisic and Karamo or Kandreva to run onto.
Yeah, I agree. I think Valero allows other people to play their game. The thing that stuck out from the papers for me was Spalletti's comments about Inter's objective. Personally, I think the team has made huge progress under him, and we still have a chance to make the Champions League. I know earlier we were top in the league and looked like you'd win, but like at the start of the season, people would have taken Champions League. So I think the fans need to get behind them, and rather than constantly berating the team and putting them down.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I was reading a book that La Gazzetta dello Sport had put together on the 110 years of Inter, and they were referencing how Sonning are looking to create a project similar to that at Manchester United, where the focus is on the medium to long term all the time. So if you do miss an objective in one season, it's not the be all and end all. We've already got significantly more points at this stage of the season than we got in the entirety of last year. And yeah, there's still massive room for improvement. But I wouldn't make getting into the Champions League the be all and end all. If we get into it, fantastic. It'll give us so much more flexibility in terms of financing the players that we can pull in. But I really hope that they hold their nerve if we do end up in the Europa League and stick with Spalletti, because I think he is definitely bringing the team in the right direction. And I've never been a fan of chopping and changing managers. I just think it adds
Particularly since Mourinho left, I think we've gone through 9 managers or 10 managers. So I think it's about time to bring some stability in that role.
I think you give a manager. I've always thought you give a manager at least 2 or 3 years. If he's not performing after that, then you ask questions. But it's very difficult for somebody to turn something around. In the space of 12 months. Following on from Napoli's win against Juve at the weekend, Il Derby d'Italia takes on added significance for Interisti this weekend, with the potential to throw a serious spanner in the works for arguably our biggest rivals. I really seriously think we've got to forget all about that, though, and concentrate solely on ourselves and our own objectives. Where do you think this match can be won or lost, James?
I think the key to this game is the mentality of Inter. Hopefully to come out and to play positive and put Juve under pressure. I mean, they're starting to lose some momentum in their season. They were knocked out with the Champions League against Real Madrid in the last minute, and the whole Buffon thing, I think that affected them, and their league form since then hasn't been the best. They've drawn one, they've lost to Napoli in the last minute of the game, and that was a crucial game. And they've won that game, they were 7 points clear, and that's pretty much the title. So I think they're starting to lose their grip a little bit. So if we can press them, put them under pressure and test their mental fortitude, hopefully they can crack under the pressure, because in recent weeks they've proven they can, albeit against slightly better teams than Inter. But the main thing I think is that we defend well and not concede space against them. I thought at times against Chievo we gave them far too much space. You can't afford to give Juve that type of space because they have the players that punish it.
Yeah, as I said earlier on, I really think Borja Valero could be the difference in this match if he's used properly. Juventus looked out on their feet against Napoli. I kind of got the impression that they looked like a team that was coming to the end of their cycle. And if they play like that again, we need to utilise it. That said, a wounded lion is always more dangerous than one that isn't. Valero spraying the ball around for our quicker players to run onto could cause havoc if the legs in Juve's defence are as heavy as they looked. I'd be worried, though, that if Valero does play, Spalletti will ask him to do that box-to-box job he was required to perform in the first half against Chievo. And then he may as well just not be on the pitch. James?
Yeah, the thing with Borja Valero is the type of player that you only really notice him for the things he does wrong. When he's having a good game, you don't tend to notice him as much because he just keeps the midfield ticking over and allows other players to play around him. He just keeps little passes going left and right. And the thing that would worry me, though, is can you rely on him in a game of this magnitude not to make mistakes? And especially being caught out of position, if he's given this box-to-box role, I think that's what hampers him when he gets forward. He tends not to have the head on him to get back and realise when he has to go back. But I think he has to start the game. I mean, Vecino won't last the whole game. And if you're looking at bringing in a sub to have an impact, I think Vecino offers that. If Vecino starts and it's not going well and we need to change to get a goal, I don't think bringing Valero on will have the same impact. So for that reason alone, I would start him ahead of Vecino.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. Looking into the sort of history segment of the show, I don't think we can fail to mention that 20th of April has gone down into history as the day we beat Barcelona 3-1 at home in the first leg of the Champions League semi-final on our way to the triplete in 2010. I mean, I remember watching it with you, James, and I think both of us were more hoping than believing at the start of the match, as Barcelona were incredibly strong then. Then the 28th of April, the second leg, which we again watched together when we got through to the final. I think when Barcelona got the first goal, we were both terrified they were going to go on and get the second. When it ended up 3-2 on aggregate, I think we both just couldn't believe it. Inter Juve this Saturday is on 28th of April too, and I'm sure a 3-2 win will be more than an acceptable result.
Yeah, definitely would. But what great times they were, and such a fantastic team. Anyway, moving on, a special mention to former Inter Primavera player Marco Levaja, who won the Next Gen Series and the Campionato Primavera under Andreas Giamiccioni, who was claimed his first honour as a senior player on Sunday as he won the league with Ike Athens.
Yeah, and there's a question coming from Davy Nerazzurro. He's interested to know what the red mark on the player's face was at the weekend. It was actually a Serie A wide protest against violence against women, a protest we at the Inter show wholeheartedly support. The idea was that the players wore a stripe of bright red lipstick across their cheek, highlighting and trying to protest against violence that's committed against women. Just thinking about that, maybe we should also show our support to our female team. Inter Femminile is locked in a battle for a spot in the Serie B promotion playoffs with Orobica of Bergamo. Their side, captained by forward Regina Beresi, Inter legend Bepe's daughter, had a great 6-0 away win last weekend. Regina doesn't limit herself to only playing football, as she's regularly a pundit on Rai's various Serie A highlights programs. And as someone who often watches them, for anyone who understands Italian, I mean, she's extremely informed and informative. Well, that's all from the Inter show for this episode. Thanks to James for joining me again.
You're welcome, Andrew. It's been enjoyable again. I look forward to the next one where hopefully we'll be discussing Inter's complete dismantling of Juve.
Hopefully. Thanks to you all for listening. And remember, if you want to send in any questions, you can use Twitter, hashtag #AskTheInterShow. Thanks again, and Forza Inter.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.